Hey everybody, this is Brad Dyke saying hi to everybody, and today we're going to be talking about the DX-720. It's being pre-staged for NVMe, and unfortunately it's not going well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first show you what I'm going to do as an alternative for this, and we'll take it from there. So basically what we've got here is typical spinning 1TB drives here. And then of course I have started the process of putting in some of my team style based SSD drives into the back panel here of the chassis. And I will take this guy out of the equation over here and pull the screws on this one and swap this out really quick. So just give me a second here. Okay, so we've got this swapped out. We're going to go ahead and put this guy in here. Lock him in and lock him in. Yes, that is on the back side of my DX-720, which is really nice. You can always build your boot disks out back here, set them up in RAID 1, and they're functional. And over here, of course, you have all the disconnected drives, but this is normally where the bulk of the drives are. And this is to test running SSD SATA opposed to spinning disk SAS for the boot drive only. And also, unfortunately, I got to take this out. So that is a bummer. Incompatibility match for the PCIe bus. That's a real pain in the butt, but it was strictly for test only anyway, so I could have technically put in the SATA version, but there's no SATA bridge here really that I can work with on that front. So I'm going to concede to that one and consider the fact that not all advanced platforms are compatible with other platforms. I'll probably try that again later, maybe with an older style intro first generation NVMe. Okay, so with that being the case and the fact that this standard PCIe 3 compatible cassette card is not compatible, and this is also a 3 as well, so unfortunately neither one of these NVMe's will work yet. I'm going to try a couple PCI tricks, but I'll do that later. These are the old spinning disks that I had in the system, and now the system is beginning the process of powering up and posting, and we're going to see first what's available for us to work with, and then secondly the ability to boot. So one of the key detail about this system is the 2.0 standard is literally that. Even though you might have a 3.0 USB output stick in there, it has limitations, let's put it that way. So usually the best thing to do there is to make sure that you do have some 2.0s around. It's good to have them around. I actually buy 2.0 USB sticks just for this reason. They're fairly large, they're usually 30 or 64 gigs, but they will work on some of these older chassis out here that require that 2.0 standard and just don't do well with 3.0 or 3.1 version sticks. So now we're beginning the process of posting and coming up into the environment. The PERT controller on board is the one I'm going to be working with. The SAS controller is not and does not have any capacity right now at this point in time. I could choose to boot off of the remote storage disk, but I'm not going to do that. Okay, so we've removed the NVMe controller out. I'll work that later. And now we're going through the process of loading the Dell SAS 6 gigabit controller interface. I'm going to bring that up. We're going to attempt to detect the SSD drives. The problem with SSD drives and the DX series is basically the fact that Dell runs a fairly decent shop when it comes to compatible systems, but they really want it under a standard, right? So yeah, you see the little Dell on there, but this is actually a Seagate Constellation Type 2 drive made by an OEM for Dell. So they like to make things look like, feel like, and be like Dell's resources, but the reality of the fact is it's still manufacturing standards. So there's a way to coerce the system into thinking, oh, well, maybe I am compatible with you. But given the nature of how difficult it is to pull out a DX-720 and put parts in and parts out and parts in and parts out, I'm going to hold off on doing that until I'm ready to retire the chassis itself. But with that being said, I have the ability here to be able to do quite a bit with what I've got. So I'm going to go ahead and attempt to bring up the SAS controller configuration, which is fully functional and fully compatible, and to check the two SSD drives on board, the two 128 gig drives I put in there, just to basically do a baseline 2022 server installation. Okay, so here we are actually inside the LSI Dell class OEM controller, and it identifies my 6 gigabit architecture, and these two SSD drives will max that out in a heartbeat. And we're going to go in and identify, and looky there, it does not detect devices. Alright, stand by for a second while I swap drive configurations. Okay, so the initial problem that we're having here is the drives are posting, but they're not posting correctly on the new motherboard, and the cycle process is a little odd. So, with that being what I mean by the cycle process is when the boot drives, or I'm sorry, when the drives are spinning up, when you power up the server chassis, it is not post-cycling correctly, but when I put the SAS drives in, I do see them successfully post-cycle. So that's telling me that we might have something going on here that's a little bit more of an issue than I initially thought. Possibly a flash firmware problem between the older RAID card that I transitioned over to the new motherboard. But I'll do a check on that to check. Now, the DX-R720 is a tricky little beast. You have to get it through the initialization and the lifecycle controller to allow it to post, and you'll see it scrolling across the bottom here as it's doing its thing. Even though I hit Control C to bring the SAS controller configuration up, it's going to time out and it's going to delay and say it cannot boot or will not post. So, in that process, I've removed my SSD drive here. I'm sorry, my my USB memory stick boot drive, to basically allow it to air out, and then I'll have to do an F11, and then from F11 go to the boot manager and basically go to the BIOS level and allow it to skip the boot process to get into the controller. So that will pop up here in just a second. Unfortunately, the diagnostic states of this particular system is a little bit, not sluggish, just very thorough. So you can't see this right now because this is a plug-and-play USB, plug-and-play switch over to VGA configuration. So if it doesn't see an active state signal, the display screen doesn't pop up. But when it does get a signal that requires that characters pop up, this is what you see. So here is what I was talking about. You're getting the error calls, and we're going to press F11 here, and that's going to take us into the BIOS. And then what you do here is you go into the BIOS boot menu, and when that comes up, you can hit a keyboard, hit one of the keys on the keyboard, and here you go. You have the post process, and then it should say down here, waiting. Okay, there it is. Please wait, evoking the SAS configuration utility tool. Now, if I think what's happening is happening, and the BIOS on the RAID controller is out of sync with the motherboard, I'm going to know that because the refresh on the RAID controller will not work. So if you know anything about SAS controllers, they're dynamic, they're hot swap and plug and play. Okay, this is not good, seeing this command line here. Okay, with that being the case, then we have something that is amiss. So let's bring on the external disk storage and see if we have the Dell controller on board, which actually should have been a PERC controller, and make sure I'm not actually accessing the SAS interface bridge. And there's an easy way to test that. Let me go ahead and plug in the external SAS connector in and see if we get a bunch of drives. Hold on. Okay, so the external SAS controller is also a G6 Dell controller, and I think I know what's wrong. So if I now press the enter key on the 6 gigabit SAS HBA, okay, it's all still correct. I'm going to go to the topography model for the drives configuration and see if I can get it to post. Give me a second here. That is interesting. Let me look at here. So I will see if I have a bus sync error and we will work that. Okay, so with that experimentation, we are at a point where things aren't quite what they seem to be. Either the onboard RAID controller has been canceled out, which I have seen this happen, specifically with like Milex cards and old Adaptec cards, trying to reach out for the same resources as LSI cards do. But this is a Dell card, so they should have automatically separated their DMA requirements so that both controllers would post. I'm not seeing the secondary controller, so I'm going to look to see if a jumper has been set to run in what we call silent mode, and that I have to go through the process of making the BIOS identify and bring up the RAID controller, or also check the adapter card set to make sure it's properly seated so it's in there. So with that being said, I'm going to bring this particular video to an end because now I have a greater, neater kind of troubleshooting process I'm going to have to take care of. So with that being said, I will let you guys go and have a great week. Take care.